Welcome to the Chronicle, the official film podcast for the People's Movies. My name is Paul, I am your host, as well as the editor of the People's Movies, and I welcome you to episode 34 of the Chronicle. If you love movies, you're in the right place. And welcome back to my co-host, Clotilde Chinichi. How are you, Clotilde?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's been a little while since you've been here on
Mm,
the podcast. You've been very, very busy. I believe you've been to a very, very small film festival.
very small. Yes, I've been to the Venice Film Festival earlier in the month and end of August. Yeah, really good festival. I'm looking forward to the next one already, but also happy to get some rest.
That's great because you went home. You went home as well for a bit of holidays as well.
Um, yes, just a little bit
That
before, so that was
that's good.
nice.
I saw your picture of your spag bol. It looked delicious.
It was.
Guess what I'm having today? Hopefully you've seen a few films that we may review in the near future here on the podcast. For this episode 34, we've got two films that we're going to review. The films we're going to review are the remake of Speak No Evil from Universal Pictures starring James McAvoy, and the final review we're going to do is Kate Winslet's Lee. And the first film for this episode 34 of the Chronicle is the remake of Speak No Evil, starring James McAvoy. Clotilde, would you like to tell us a little bit about it, if you liked it or didn't like it?
So, Speak No Evil, as mentioned in the introduction, is a remake of a Danish film from 2022. This time, the setting is in the UK instead, and that's something that the director himself said was very important to him when he was approached about this project, sort of his first kind of idea. Really, what he wanted to do was set in the UK and hopefully recreate something that people can kind of relate to or understand, maybe culturally. The film follows two different families. One is an American family made up of Louise and Ben and their daughter Agnes. They meet this other British family in Italy while they're both on vacation. Very different families. The British couple, made up of Paddy and is it Ciara? Something like that. And
Kiara, yeah.
Ciara, there you go.
And you're Italian as
Got.
well.
I know. Then I forgot her name after all of it.
Yeah.
Embarrassing. Yeah, but they seem a lot more like carefree and sort of like the cool parents, really. They also have a son. He seems like kind of very shy, and they say that he has had problems sort of bonding with people, especially because he has this sort of issue that he can't really talk first, and so he really struggles to connect with people. But he seems to have a really good relationship with Agnes. The kids bond in this script. And even though maybe the sort of American family doesn't seem completely sure at first, they do start developing a friendship as well when they both go back to their respective homes in London and in the British countryside. They sort of keep in touch, and the British couple invites them over to their house, really in the middle of nowhere in the countryside. And after a little bit, they're a little bit unsure, but then they do decide to go because they think it would be good to have a change of scenery, but also for their daughter because they know she gets along with the other family's kids. And that's where things really start to sort of get going and become a little bit more scary, I would say. And I think the film does that really well, sort of building this tension specifically, because it really, I want to say that it thrives between being very funny. There are moments where it's really funny. I saw it at a press screening and the whole cinema was laughing. Like, I don't think that happens very often, especially with horror films. I didn't expect it to be this funny. But here and there, especially from the moment where they go to the countryside, there are like some lines or like a look or a situation that makes you like think about it twice and like it's not so funny anymore. It starts being creepy.
Yeah.
Especially I think in the third act is where the tension really builds and is done quite well. You do have to wait to get there, but I do think that is done quite well. There are moments where I really felt like I was on the edge of my seat, and that's because I think the film makes us care about the characters a lot, especially the kids, obviously. But it's really good how their relationships and also their kind of individual lives are built in the film. We find out more and more as the film goes on, which I think is quite interesting, especially about the relationship between Louise and Ben and their daughter too. Like her character really comes out, I think, during the film, and she seems to grow up a lot. It's really a sort of rough journey for her specifically. And I really enjoyed seeing that. I think the actors are really good as well, especially in terms of like kids. I think the actress who plays Agnes is so good. I think at that age, especially because she's does some really emotional scenes, but also she's also scared herself. I think she portrays different emotions quite well. As a kid, it's quite invested. Obviously, James McAvoy, like, what do I even have to say? I think we all know that he's a good actor by now.
Yeah, yes,
Um,
yes, yeah.
I think obviously his performance really shines because he's equally funny and scary at the same time. And I think it's really hard to do both and has sort of like charisma that makes us sort of want to know more about him as the characters do, but also be creeped out at the same time. Also, really enjoy seeing him on screen overall. So I did quite like the film. I haven't seen the original. I'm not quite sure how it compares, but I read about it and I talked to friends about it. It seems to me, from my understanding of the original, that maybe the original is a bit more scary or of a horror per se. I think this one is sort of like, I mean, it is a horror, but I do want to say it's
Yeah,
more towards thriller perhaps because it's really
yeah.
tense more than anything. It's just not like jump scares, I think. And funny again. I'm not sure if the original is quite as funny, but I found this one like hilarious at times even. And I think that is where the difference might be. I know the ending is also completely different, which is also I think quite interesting to like see where this one goes. I do think it might be a little bit predictable, but that's not necessarily a fault. I think you don't really know, how the characters are gonna get out of the situation, and that's really the enjoyment of it for me, especially in the third act. And yeah, I thought it was a very fun time more than anything.
The director for this version is James Watkins. Films that he's done is like Eden Lake, and he also did the Woman in Black, the one with Daniel Radcliffe, the Harry Potter, which is considered the scariest 12 rated horror film ever by some critics when it came out, because it came out, no, the 12 rating was not that long created, just before that film came out. Forgive me, I'm not going to even try to pronounce the two Danish brothers who created the original. One of them is on board as a producer, and you can see throughout the film there's a lot of little homages to the original film. I'm going to say this in every review, just to sort of cover our backs. Sometimes there is the odd spoiler getting mentioned. It's not always done deliberately. Sometimes the type of film that we're reviewing, we sometimes have to say these things, just to sort of give you some idea what we're talking about. And there's something that the kids actually find out, they break into and they find something, and it starts to unravel Paddy and Kiara's what they're actually doing in this film. As in what the film is all about, I believe it's sort to do with a couple of things. I think it's sort of to do with the entitlement, as in the Americans, who are played by McKenzie Davis and Scoot McNairy, Ben and Louise. You can see they come from like a sort of middle class, or maybe middle upper class even, upper middle. They're a little bit snobbish at times, especially when Paddy and Kiara, James McAvoy comes from a town just down the road from me, which is only 10 miles away. I think it's Greenock. I'm from Paisley, which is Gerard Butler country. You can see they're a wee bit. I'm going to be honest, I work in the holiday industry. I work for a very well-known tour operator holiday company. I'm not going to mention them, but they like to do a lot of holding hands in the video, in the TV ads. A song in it, and so I see your, like we call your typical working class holiday makers, and some people are maybe going for some just a little bit more special, maybe like a 5-star, 4-star, 5-star hotel, and you can see that they're completely different. Some are a little bit, how would you say it, loutish, do you know what I mean, loutish, where they're very loud, very proud, they get drunk and don't mind showing off, where somebody in luck who's got a luxurious holiday, they like to be a bit more nicer, if you like to say, maybe a little bit snobbish. And Ben and Louise could be seen as a little bit more snobbish compared, because when we first meet Paddy, we meet them in, is it Tuscany, the villa, the holiday villa in Italy they're in? Yeah. Lovely place, I've also been a travel agent as well, and the place that they holiday in, it's a sort of little boutique hotel, and it's probably a good 5-star with a Michelin star food and everything there. And Paddy and Kiara stand out like a sore thumb. You can see they're not the usual type, but they've got money. they've got money. Paddy says, did he say he's a doctor? And doesn't he? He says he's a doctor in this. But the question is he a doctor? Oops, spoiler. Yeah. Yep. There's a lot of things go through it, little red flags go through this film. It's a film actually for maybe the first hour and 10 minutes to be patient to film. But little things start to unravel through this. There's another thing I think the film is also about is a bit of male toxicity. And there's a scene in it where Paddy and Ben are actually just in the middle of a big hill and they just scream out, ah! This is actually also I've been told, in the original film. I'm like you, Clotilde, I have not seen the original. Bradley Hadcroft, who does all the horror films on the People's Movies, has seen it. It's now on Shudder, and he watched it at Fright Fest London a few years ago. And when I told him, he asked me about the end scene, and I told him about it, and he says it's complete. You're right, you mentioned it. It is completely different. I don't think Speak No Evil is a jump scare film. There is an odd jump scare in it. I think it's a film that builds on your fear, your dread. It's a sense of dread that some horrible's going to happen. Somebody's going to do something horrible. When you watch the film, they do, And when you mention about the people laughing, I also watched it in a press screening in Glasgow. We were the total opposite. There wasn't many as in the screen, but there was the odd laugh. I have to admit, there was an odd laugh. As in the ending, yeah, the ending is totally bonkers, but bonkers in an entertaining and fun way. And this is where you might do a lot of laughing in it. This is where I think it loses the plot a little bit, but not necessarily in a total bad way. And there's a song in it. It's probably a cringeworthy song now, but back in the late 90s, early 90s, it was up there with the songs like, is it Steps? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? That song. It's Cotton Eye Joe. I mentioned it in the tweet I did it. We were recording this. I think it was recorded by someone called Red Sox, but spelt the way as in the baseball team. This is where you start to see the true Paddy. He gets very frustrated with his young boy. Young boy, I think, is played by an actor called Dan Hogg. And yes, and the young girl is played by Alex West Leffler. You can see totally through the film that the boy is trying to say stuff to the young girl and the other family. The young boy's called Ant in this, and he's trying to tell the young girl who is like an anxiety problem she may have or something like that. That they're in danger, and little sign through it, as I say, that Ben and Louise start figuring out as well there's something going on here, But the Cotton Eye Joe bit, I think maybe get a few people laughing, a little bit cringeworthy. You start to feel sorry for the young boy as well at times, and I think that I would say this is the stage when things truly unravel. Would you say that as well, Clotilde? This is the point when
it's those scenes that really makes you question everything. I think it's the first one where you're like, okay, they need to get out of here. They just have to.
By the way, Chiara's played by an Irish-Italian actress called Aislinn Franciosi. People might know her from The Nightingale, which came out a few years ago. That was the follow-up movie by the Australian director who made The Babadook, and it's a very brutal film. The character she plays goes through some hard, brutal things. It stars also Sam Claflin, who's a horrible character in this as well. Maybe if you want to check it. I believe The Nightingale's either on, it's one of the streaming channels. If you want to watch that, it's a brutal film. I have to admit, I did enjoy it. There was a few funny bits in it. I have heard, as I said, I've heard of screens where people have actually laughed at it, but no laughing at it, laughing with it, I believe, is probably a more way laughing at, because every 2 minutes, James McAvoy's got one of the grins. He's just got one of the cheesy grins. It's like, it's a bit sinister, the grin. I think you know what I'm talking about, Clotilde, on this. He's got that sort of grin, it's something evil behind him, Clotilde, what is your final thoughts on Speak No Evil, and what rating would you give it?
I am giving it a 3.5. I think it's a perfectly good movie. Nothing that kind of makes you think about it for ages or sort of shocks you. I think that's often the case with horror movies, though. I think it's really hard to have super good ones, but at the same time, I feel like I haven't seen really, really bad ones. Maybe I just picked the right one. So I think they sort of sit into this major category where I feel like Speak No Evil really fits into. It's an enjoyable time, I think, to watch, to go out and watch a movie. It's quite fun, and I think you get what you want from it. You get the scary bits and you get the funny bits. Works, I think.
Yeah, I'm giving it 3.5 as well. So if you like those sort of slow burning, creepy dread films that build up the dread, it's not got the sort of jump scares in it. I think you're really going to like this film. Sometimes when they make remakes of films, sometimes people say you should watch the remake before, watch the original before you see the remake. Some people say, no, watch the remake and then watch the original. For this one, I would say watch this and then watch the remake and sort of judge them. You're totally right. I've been told that the film's a lot more grimmer. The original film, a lot more grimmer. Yeah, this is more like a psychological horror thriller type thing. Overall, if you want a little laugh, as you said, I think something bad's going to happen, and well, at the end, a lot does happen. Check this out. It's not the worst of all remakes. Yeah, it may stay a little bit the original at certain points in the film, but I'll give it kudos for trying to be a little bit different. So yeah, so there you have it, folks. Speak no evil. Both of us give 3.5 stars. And for the final review of this episode of the Chronicle, episode 34, we're going to review Lee, which is out in UK cinemas from Sky Cinema. So this one stars Kate Winslet, and Kate Winslet, this is like a bit of a personal project for her, and she stars as Lee Miller, or Lee Elizabeth Miller, and this has been a bit of a personal project for the actress, who's also on board as the producer. This project has actually been running, I believe, at least over 10 years, maybe even 20 years. It's directed by her good friend, Ellen Kuras. Kuras, people might know her more for her cinematography, and she was the cinematographer on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. The film for about, Clotilde, I think that was about 2004, wasn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, it was sort of 2004. The one with Jim Carrey, and one I think was one of his best films. Kuras, obviously, as I said, many people know her from her cinematography, but she has been a director since 2008. She's done a lot of work in documentaries, especially her debut in 2008, as I said, for The Betrayal. But she's also done a lot of TV work, No Way Ozark, Legion, and more recently with Umbrella Academy. And this film is actually based... Kuras came on board because she got a book from Lee Miller, and when she was reading it and obviously looking at Lee Miller's work, she thought of Kate Winslet right away. Not just with they look very similar characters, people. It was also her character. This film actually focuses on Lee Miller, the war photographer and photojournalist, the period she was that where she established herself as one of the great important photographers. But I will say, I don't know if you know this, Clotilda, that Lee Miller wasn't the only female war journalist, photojournalist that was actually in the World War II.
I did not know this, actually.
It was a lady who was an American lady, also working for Life magazine. That was Margaret Burke White, and she's sort of considered the first. But if you're in photography, both of them are considered pioneers, and I think that's the best way. And both of them are big inspiration of any girls or women who want to be photographers, and photographers in general, because their work is very, very important. I'm an amateur photographer. I will say that. I've known about both of them for a long, long, long time. I don't know if you can you remember when we reviewed Civil War, Clotilda?
Yeah.
Lee Miller is where Kirsten Dunst's character name comes from.
Oh, yes, I was going to say. Very interesting.
Yeah, that's who she's named after. And then obviously Kaylee Spani's character, seen Lee Miller as one of our inspirations. So there's a little fact for you. Not a lot of people remember that little fact. So this film is inspired by the lives of Lee Miller, a book that was written by her son, Anthony Penrose. Him and his estate, his mother's estate, have given permission, obviously, to use our imagery and our biography as the inspiration of the film. When we do meet her in the south of France in 1937. However, we slightly skim over it a little bit. a life sort of started by accident in the world that we meet her in 1927, when she's nearly ran over by the Vogue publisher, Condé Nast, which sort of opened her door first as a fashion model. And they sort of skim over that a little bit when she goes for her first job as a photographer with the actor who's playing Cecil Beaton, who sort of jokes that she's too old to be a model, which and nowadays Clotilde is totally wrong, because I believe at that time she was born in 1907, so this was 1937. So she was only playing playing late around about 30-year-old. So a lot of the models these days, the supermodels these days, are on their 30s. Some of them are even older than me. They're into their 50s and even older, you know. So I think there's no age to certain jobs in the world. So when we do meet her, as I said, we meet her in the south of France. She's living a life of luxury with the establishment, the art scene of the time. She's enjoying the good life, the food, the drink, the good company, the partying, and inverted commas, a little bit more, much more. As I said, she's living amongst the art scene, mingling with the likes of Picasso, Man Ray, whilst at the same time as we see her just drinking and raving away. The television's on, and we see the rise of Hitler and the rise of Nazism, which is the world was on the verge of World War II at that time. This is also, she meets her husband, I think it was Roland Penrose, played by Alexander.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, Alexander Skarsgård, who was part of that establishment. He was our match right away, because immediately she's a very hard woman to please. You could even call her a muse, not just in photography, but also in the art. The arts is one. There's one thing that she says to a lot of people in there. She loved the sex, drink, and drugs, basically. And so she was a woman with a bit of a reputation, and she was very difficult to please. And do you know how they go back to the revolution of, was it the 60s, when women kept burning the bras, taking them off, burning the bras? And she probably noticed right away, Clotilde, in that scene. She gets to the dinner table with all her friends and relaxing. She strips off her shirt and just sits there semi-naked. Like and no one cared. So being naked, semi-naked. I did art and design, graphic design in university. So we draw naked models, so artists are used to seeing the naked person. When she meets Roland, who is an art dealer, but he's also a surrealist painter, the two of them, as soon as they lock eyes, you can't get the two of them, separate the two of them, you know. Every time they get a chance together, they are together, pardon the expression. And then it comes to a point, all our friends are either going back to Paris, but Roland, he lives in London. Roland Penrose, he offers Lee to come back. And Lee, as I say, it's quite difficult. She's someone, as we learn, who doesn't stay in one place very long. She moves on. She's a bit of a wanderer, you know. But London becomes a very, very important part of her life. So it's at this stage here, she's trying to look for a job. Roland's doing the painting. World War II's broke out. Her friends in France, she's lost contact with them. And the war's starting, and she needs a job. So she heads into the British Vogue, and this is where she gets her first photojournalist job position, where she goes and meets a woman who becomes a big part of her life, her job life. Audrey Withers is played by Andrea Riseborough. And as I said, at this stage, World War II started. So the first task that they give us to document the war effort at home, especially the part that the women are doing. And you click through this period of time, you get to see all the pictures, and even some of them are very surreal. And you'll agree with me, Clotilde, that the scene where she gets the secretary and a couple other people for the building that they're in, and she gets them to wear masks, and it looks like they might be in a bunker. That was a very surreal mask, you know. That's, you know, the scene I'm talking about. You know, I think London's just been bombed, and the Vogue have lost their original building, and they're now underground, like in the bottom of the building. So that starts to show, and the pictures she's taking, she's going round the rubble of London. She's going out to the war, the army bases, the British Army, because at this stage it's the British Army that's letting her go in. This is where she starts to learn about being how would I put it? Because this period of time, the army said the front line is not for ladies, and there's certain parts of the base that she goes to. She goes here with her friend Dave Sherman, who's played by Is it Andy Samberg? Andy Samberg. At this stage, he's playing Dave Sherman, who's a very famous photojournalist for the Life magazine, and she's not allowed to go into certain places. And then she finds a building where it's women only. And so she goes in and she starts taking pictures of the cabin where the lady's staying in, and they've got their stockings hanging over the windowsill. Everything's hanging out. She sees a picture of Vogue magazine. She's reading it, and then one of the ladies who does work for the army but doesn't work in the front line comes in, and she starts taking pictures of her. And then she goes to Audrey, I want to go to the front line. I want to go to the front line. The British Army rejects her, but Dave Sherman, girl, gives her an idea. She goes to the Americans and they accept her. Right away, she starts to see the sexism there, where the front line is not for a woman. Eventually, she sneaks in and she starts to see stuff. And then the man who's in charge of that sort of base, he says, eventually gives in and says, we'll send you over to to St. Malo in France. And this is where you get to see the bombings there. Was it napalm one? It was napalm bombings in St. Malo. And she's thrown right into the front line and she gets to see how dangerous it is, not just for women, but also for men, the soldiers that are there. And she starts to would you say, Clotilde, that was a bit of a shock for her, sort of put her, because she's obviously, as we see, she's a very determined person to get what she wants, and as we learn through her early days, she's determined and she gets what she wants, and she does eventually. Do you think this is a little bit puts her in a place why certain people were saying women shouldn't be here, in the front line?
I think that was sort of one of the most interesting things of the film, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think part of it was done well, I think, in showing sort of like the discrimination that she gets and sort of how nobody's willing to give her a chance, right?
Yeah.
But I also think it could have been done a little bit better. Like, I feel like a lot of it was more about how she can be at the front rather than why women should be doing this
Yes.
profession and be allowed to be at the front. And obviously, it's a lot to ask of one film, but
Yes.
I do feel like that nuance could have been explored a little bit better.
Yeah, it's because they open with the scene where she's actually on that front line and a bomb explodes in front of her and she's shocked. And usually when they do scenes like that, where something happens at the beginning, it sort of leads it up to the finale. But this isn't the finale. This is like a quarter way through the film.
I know. That's why I thought it was a really odd choice to have that at the beginning. And I think maybe they know that it was the best scene of the whole film because I thought it was.
Yeah.
It's just, that editing choice was a bit weird to me as well.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, there was obviously an opening. There was a bit where you see the three women, just because they fell in love with the Nazi soldiers. They treated them like traitors, shaving their hair, and that's one of her famous pictures where she's taking them. The resistance fighters are taking the three women out in front, calling them collaborators, traitors, and shave their hair. That's quite a powerful scene as well. You see that?
Yes.
Yeah, we see that, and then eventually, I found it quite odd where we're in France and it's liberation time.
Yeah.
However, we get to see some horrors there as well, where we get to meet our old friend Solange, played by Marion Cotillard. Forgive me, I forget what her surname was. And Solange, she's playing the French editor of the Vogue magazine, and you get to learn, because obviously through history books and television, generations after start to learn the horrors that happen. We've never learned from people who were actually in the war, be it the survivors, be it them soldiers, be it the photographers. And she's able to get back to the house of Solange, and she finds her there, and she's at total opposite of the character we meet her at the front beginning of the film. And through her experience, we start to learn the horrors. I won't say much more about it because I did mention about throughout any of the reviews that we do here or in future podcasts or on previous podcasts, there might be the odd spoiler, and I do apologise if it comes from any of us. It's just sometimes that we have to say it because of the type of film it is. So, and then suddenly the sort of war becomes sort of secondary for a bit.
Hmm.
You know, I have to admit, Andy Samberg, I'm not a fan of him in his comedy. Is it Brooklyn 999 he's in? That's where a lot of people might know him from.
Yes.
He does a lot of stuff with films like with Adam Sandler. If anyone knows me, I cannot stand him unless he's doing a proper dramatic film where I know he's got the dramatic chops. And this, to some people, might be of a bit of an odd choice to have him in a dramatic role, but I thought he was fantastic. I think him and Kate Winslet were the two strongest parts of the actual film.
100%.
Yeah, and he's proven that some of the films that he's done, the comedy films, are absolutely terrible. That he should be doing some more dramatic films like Adam Sandler, who he does a lot with, who's proven. Jim Carrey, as I mentioned earlier on, the Eternal Spotless Mind. They're all comedic actors who have proven they can act, and I think he should be doing more of it. I actually think the weak spot is Roland Penrose, Alexander Skarsgård's character, who's her husband, and and there's one scene. Go back to Sandberg's character when they get. Forgive me if the pronunciations. Dachau and Buchenwald. Sorry, my German and Polish is not very good. The concentration camps. This is where I believe this is where Lee Miller's true talent comes through. This is where people recognise how talented a photographer she was. This is where she picks up the horrors of what really happened. And I think it's, as she says during the film, Lee says during the film, once you see them, they'll never leave you. The horrors will never leave you. Because what I never mentioned, sorry, apologies, I never mentioned earlier, there's a lot of jumping back in time because she's getting interviewed by, I'm not going to, what do you think, Clotilde, should we say who actually Joshua Connor's character is? I think
Oh,
that's
I
a bit
don't
of a
know. It's a
spoiler.
bit of a spoiler. Yeah, I think
Yes,
so. But like in Wikipedia, he's listed as that character. I
yes,
thought it was a bit of a spoiler. Yeah.
yeah. So when we meet him, he's like a journalist who wants to explore her story. There's another thing I think about that scene is he actually talking to someone? I will explain that to you later.
Mm.
I'm going to let the audience go and see the film because it's
Yeah.
also it's a Sky Cinema film, so it's going to, I think in a month or two it'll probably be on Sky Cinema if people don't see it in the cinemas. Him and Sandberg, I think the two of them are the emotional backbone of the film. Obviously, the character Sandberg plays Dave Sherman. That's not a spoiler. We know right away who he is because he's a good friend of Lee Miller's. Is when they get to Dachau, he just collapses with emotion and he shows his vulnerabilities, actually, I think it showed his capacity to be a dramatic actor as well. And there's also a famous picture taken by Dave Sherman of Lee Miller actually bathing herself in Hitler's, I don't know if it was one of his many houses. That's a very infamous scene. They do reenact that scene as well. So, yeah, it is. I really enjoyed the film. I'm glad I watched it. There's a lot of paint by numbers in it. But before I do my roundup, my apologies, Clotilde, I've been on a little bit here. I'll let you say what you think about the film if you liked it and you didn't like it.
I also liked it. I think it's like the main theme of the film is very important with the sort of like inspiration of how important it is to photograph these moments and for our collective historical memory.
Yeah,
And also like this whole issue of getting them published, I think it sort of spoke to a wider debate of like whether or not we should see these images. and
yeah,
and I think it's a very real debate even today. Like I think
yeah,
when people talk about sort of censorship in media and social media,
yeah.
specifically, the story of the picture of the Napan girl always comes out. And
Yes,
I think this film, very much made me reflect on that. And, if you don't know, the Napan girl thing is this picture that was taken during the Vietnam War.
yeah,
And I think every social media, Facebook for sure, censors it. And it really makes you think because it's usually censored for like child nudity, but it
yeah.
really portrays the horror of the war. So it's this sort of question, like where do we draw the line in that sense? And what is too much to see and what is necessary on the other hand. But and I thought that was interesting, but I also thought that it might have been a little bit more interesting for me if the actual picture, because this is based on a real person and real photos that she took,
Yes.
if they were used a little bit more in the film. I think they only are seen at the end, sort of towards the credits, with the credits really,
Yeah.
and very easy to miss. Like you could easily walk out and not see them or only see a few. And I think maybe that's the whole point. It's also a film honoring her memory. And I think I really wish they had used the photos more because it feels like that's the whole point. And the photos are very much part of the film. But during the film, they sort of use recreations of them with the actors or with the scenes that we see in the movie. And maybe it wouldn't have been as like nice to see, but I do wish they had used the actual pictures instead of showing
Yeah.
us like pictures within the film, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Because I think it would have been a lot more powerful, specifically because it's a real life story that really underlines the importance of this picture and the importance of seeing them. I do wish they had done that. I also feel like the film is really weirdly paced. Like you mentioned, how it sort of jumps between like her in France and the war and sort of the liberation of Paris. And there's a lot that I feel like could have been paced a little bit better. I think the war sort of segments, especially when she's at the front, are very well done.
Yeah.
But the sort of before and after was a little bit weird to me. I understand the decision of starting in like 1938 France, but I do feel like it doesn't spend enough time on it because those people, like her friends in France, and that's where she meets her then, like future husband, they're not like that sort of setup is not explored enough, I think, to then make me care about her seeing her friends again, or to be fair, even her husband. I don't think is explored very much as a character.
Yeah.
I think I agree with you that Kate Winslet and Andy Samberg are really the best actors in this, and they really shine. But I think it's also because they were given more to work with. It feels like everybody else was just really there in the background with very little to to do, to be honest, or to explore. And while I did like the two sort of main performances, I think there was a lot more that could have been done before, sort of like in that before period, or the how can I say, like this sort of present timeline
Yes.
when she's sort of recalling all of this. I think that's also quite rushed, especially at the end, like you mentioned, this sort of reveal in terms of characters. I I thought it was interesting as a concept, but not very well handled in the sense that it could have been a whole other film compared to what I was seeing. And there was a sort of like feeling that I could have seen a lot more. That if they let me sit with this sort of twist, they tried to pull like a couple of twists, I think, in the final scene,
There is, yeah.
but none of them really feel true or shock me at all because it's like, oh, I know this is the last 5 minutes, and I think they could have been just explored a little bit better, maybe jumping between present and wartime a little bit more or just sort of hinting at it earlier. I don't really know, but I think it's a sort of pacing issue at the very
Yeah.
core of it. But I did like what the film was trying to do, in many ways. I think I personally didn't know much about her, Lee Miller, before watching the film, and I thought it was a great way to sort of learn more about her. You know, like you said, it's based on a book written by her son, so it's truly, I think, a realistic portrait of who she was and honoring her legacy in this sense. So I think it works very well in that sense. But I do have some slight issues with it. I think it could have been like a fantastic film, and instead it's just good, which is not a bad thing, but
Yeah.
in some ways I do think it could have been a little bit more, especially because the main performances are so good. Like I think maybe in another film they could have even been part of an award conversation, but as it is, I don't think it would be.
Totally agree because there's a lot of things in there. As you were saying about the photographs, as I mentioned, I'm an amateur photographer. I bought a camera last year. I've always wanted to do photography. I watch a lot of YouTube videos with a lot of photographers on there. Like I like street photography, which is they go around say cities of the world, like Tokyo, and you see them trying out new cameras and they're taking scenes, and what the next minute they do, they take the picture, and in the right hand corner the actual picture comes up with all this data that photographers know, like your ICO and things like that. if they can do that in a YouTube video, they could have easily have done something like that on the actual film. As you said, I think the idea that the film had was to show them all at the end, a lot of the photographs, where you also see a lot of the real people, the Dave Shermans, Lee Miller as well. The scene with Josh O'Connor, that's set in 1970s. 1970s, yeah, you're right. There's not much. You see a little bit at the beginning, the odd bit during the film, and all the good interviews always lie. They all lie, that type of thing. To sort of give an idea of the character of who Lee Miller was. Going back to it, I'm not going to spoil it, but he heard the expression that a painting paints 1,000 words. I think it's a painting. A picture paints 1,000 words. Yeah, makes me think about, as I was saying, something else. A potential reveal at the end as well, to do with Josh O'Connor or one of the characters. Because when you see a picture, a lot of things speak to you, like it's speaking to you, and that's sort of one of the things about Lee Miller's pictures. And any fantastic photographer, the picture speaks to you. For us, we film, the film speak to us, and we get to know. I don't really like that. I really don't like that. Anyway, what rating do you give? What's your final thoughts and what rating do you give this film?
I ended up giving it a 3.5 because I think that despite some issues that I had with it, I think it's still a really good movie. I think it's a movie that deserves to be seen. Some scenes, like I said, like especially the ones on the front, are especially good. And I think it goes beyond the sort of war genre. I think it's a film that can interest people beyond that or beyond the biopic genre that it may fit in. I think there's a lot more to it than either of those. So it's in that sense, I do think it could have a really wide audience. And it's a good film overall.
Yeah, I give it 3.5 as well because there was a lot in it. I think if they added the pictures in there, it might have intrigued more photographers to come in and see that part of her life. But I think it was more interested in her emotional side of things, how it affected her. Because as the letter goes, and especially for the scene in the 1970s, you can see she's got some sort of PTSD there as well. But fantastically acted by Sandberg and Winslet. There's a wee bit of paint by numbers with that side of things, as in the biopic. But yeah, there's a lot of areas I could explore more. But yeah, I'll give it 3.5 stars. So you have it, folks. 3.5 stars for Lee. And there you have it, folks. That's your wrap. That is your episode 34 of The Chronicle. Thank you for joining me. Thank you very much to Universal Pictures and Sky Cinema for letting us review their movies. Both Lee and Speak No Evil will be in UK and Irish cinemas now. If you do live outside the UK or Ireland, please check your local listings to see if the film is out in your area. You can also find The Chronicle on many of your popular download sites for your podcasts, such as Spotify, Podbean, Amazon Music, YouTube, Castbox, Listen Notes, and obviously over at the People's Movies. Clotilde, thank you very much for joining us. Can you let the people know where they can find you online, where they can read your reviews, and how they can find you on social media?
Yes, I'm a staff writer for Loud and Clear Reviews, and of course I write for the People's Movies.
Thank you.
And occasionally I do write for websites like Movie Marker, Little White Lies, and The Independent, to name a few. On social media, I'm at The First of Being Chloe on Instagram and Films with Chloe on both Letterboxd.
Thank you very much. As in The Chronicle and The People's Movies, you'll find us on Facebook at The People's Movies, same on X and Twitter at The People's Movies, Instagram at The People's Movies, Pinterest is TPM_UK, and we're over at YouTube at The People's Movies 1. You'll also find some of the latest episodes from the part we've been in Podbean over there as well. Sometimes we will continue to chat over at The Chronicle Take 2. Stay tuned on social media to find out when new episodes will be arriving, and also over at The People's Movies. Sign up for the email newsletter over at The People's Movies, and that will keep you updated as well. And obviously, any reviews anyone does, including myself and Clotilde. You can also show your support for The Chronicle and The People's Movies at Buy Me a Coffee and at PayPal. You can also share our podcast on social media with your friends and family. And if you're listening to the podcast via one of those popular podcast download sites, please do give us a rating, give us a little comment. This is how more people find out about The Chronicle. Other than that, Clotilde, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you. Thank you. And to you folks, thank you for joining us. Until the next time, enjoy the movies.